Hey guys, welcome to another video that I'm doing. A couple days ago, I received a comment asking how to do a turn-based combat system. So today I took some time to do that and create that for you. This is going to be an asset that I'm going to be uploading onto itch.io in the next couple days, so you'll be able to download it there and play with it yourself and implement it into your own game. But I just wanted to walk through what was involved in this project so that you understand what it is you're getting yourself into when you download this and start playing with it. So here is what the final product looks like. Now I just used a couple background that I just drew up real quick and some old sprites of mine that I just kind of repurposed. So here we have this game running. It starts defaulted to this kind of invisible object here, and that overlooks the whole board. So here we have two teams, a red team and a blue team. And right now, the only way that you can shift through characters next on the list is just using the arrow keys. But the way that I've designed it is that you can just copy this script call into anywhere in your game, and it will automatically iterate through your characters. So if I go ahead and press right, we're going to go to the first character on the red team. I press right again, we'll go to the second character on the red team. If I press right again, I'll go to the first character on the blue team, blue team, blue team. And I can also go backwards too, so this keeps track of the list in reverse order. And once I go all the way through, it comes back to our middle, and then it resets again. And you'll notice I added a little bit of camera movement in there. The camera's not super amazing, but I just threw that in there just for a little detail. It wasn't really the big focus of this video. I just wanted to have a little bit more detail in here to kind of help showcase which characters are being the main focus. So what's really cool about the way that this is set up is that this is entirely dynamic. So no matter how big this list gets of players on here, or how big or small either of these teams get, this code will work just fine. All you have to do is just push them into an array, a list basically. So let me walk through the code real quick. We only have a few objects and a few scripts, so this is pretty much everything that is involved with this game. We have our sprites and our rooms, but that's kind of insignificant. You'll see that when you download the project. But when I go ahead and open up Combat Manager, this is kind of where all of the main code, the main setup is taking place. So I'm just going to kind of walk through what's going on and just explain the process, my thought process when designing this. So here I have my two teams created, and they are both just DS lists. So this is a built-in GameMaker data structure, and this is similar to a vector in any sort of C language, or an array list in Java, or any sort of dynamic list that changes size automatically. So we wanted this list to be dynamic and not fixed in any size. If you wanted your game to only have a maximum of 5 characters, then 5 players on each side, then you could set it to an array. And since you know the fixed size, it would actually be more efficient than using the data structures, because these are a little costly and a little slow in processing. But I wanted this to be as flexible and dynamic as possible, so I just used the list so that we could change the size of our team at will. I also have this other list called intermediate. Now you'll notice in the project, oh, I closed it, so let me run it. But you'll notice in the project, the camera would focus in on kind of a middle object in between the two teams. So here I would cycle through the characters on the blue team, and then after that it would come to this kind of reset point. Intermediate is just a list of objects that you want to cycle in between the teams. So you could have, I don't know, a sign here, you could have some UI elements up here, you could have some things in the background, you could have something in the middle. Intermediate is just that quote-unquote team that exists between the red and the blue team. So right now, the only thing that exists is this intermediate object underscore camera focus point. It's just an empty object that doesn't hold anything or have any code, that just exists in the middle of this room. And the camera just comes in and focuses in on it. Just to kind of signify what this intermediate list can be used for and how you can use it in the game. But I also made it really easy for you to just comment that out if you just want to cycle between the teams back and forth without any sort of pause in between it. But I liked being able to kind of zoom back out, see the whole board, and then go back into each character one by one. Oh, I don't know why I keep closing that. I'm going to probably show you that a million more times. But So here is kind of how we're keeping track of turns. So I have a couple variables. 3 of them are keeping track of the current, next, and previous teams. And 3 of them are keeping track of the current, next, and previous players. I'll go more into this in a second. The index is keeping track of where we are in the team roster, right? So the red team was 2 characters, the blue team was 3 characters. The index is going to just be pointing to that current player that we're accessing inside of the team. This starts at 0 because we want to start at the first object. And here you can actually see I'll implement that by saying current team index, because we set that equal to 0 at the beginning, and we want to access that first element in the list when we start iterating through our team. So that's pretty much everything that's really important for this combat manager. You'll notice that I have 2 events left and right, but the way that I designed this is that previous player and next player are scripts that can be called anywhere. So I'm just using left and right to iterate through the list of characters, but you could put this block of code anywhere and it will take care of your iteration through your character list at any point. So you could have it in the middle of an alarm event, or in a step event, or in some other, key input press event. It doesn't really matter. The way it's designed is it's supposed to be as universal and flexible as possible. So these bits of code can go wherever you need to decide to go to the next player or go to the previous player. For now, I just threw it on the arrow keys just so I could test it out and make sure that it works. So let me break down what each of these do real quick. So next player is going to be our first script. Let me come back here. You'll notice I had this script here called create players. This is important. Again, a lot of these scripts I put in there because you're going to want to move this to wherever you decide to use it. So in your game, wherever you're creating these characters and populating them into the array, this is where this needs to go. So all that this create players script does is it creates instances of our objects, so our 5 players and then our one intermediate camera focus object, and then it pushes those objects into our lists. So you notice that I push my P1, my P2 into my O combat manager.red team list, and I push P3, P4, P5 into the blue list. And then I push C1, which is that camera focus point, into that intermediate point. And then all I'm doing here is I'm just setting the sprite. Since I'm using just a player parent object to represent all of these, I'm just also setting the sprite information here, which you'll see in the sprites. So this is designed to be replaced with your code and to put wherever you need to in your project. But for now, I just plop that right in here. The most important takeaway from this is that it doesn't matter where you create it or how you create it. You just need to make sure that those objects end up in these lists at some point. And as long as they're in these lists, then the rest of the code will work just fine. So next player and previous player work pretty similarly. You'll notice we do a couple script calls up here, and I'll go over those in a second. But all we're doing is we're just incrementing our current team index variable that I showed earlier. So we just check to see if that index is less than the current team. And if that's the case, then we increment it. If not, we set it to 0, and then we move on to the next team. So that means we've reached the end of the list. At this point, we say, okay, we want to increment to the next character, but that was the last character in our current team, so we want to push to the first character in the next team. So we just set current team turn is equal to the next team turn. So we're setting the current team to the next team, and then we're setting that index to 0. So we're saying, hey, get that 0 index object on our next team. And then here, we're just setting our current player to be our current player team, and we want to get our current team list and use that index that we've created. So we're saying, hey, our current player is always the current team and whatever our current index is. That's how we're doing that. And the same thing for the previous player. It does the exact same thing, except for we just decrement. So we say, hey, as long as we're greater than 0, just move down the list. But once we've got to that point here, we know, okay, well, we're at the first character in that list we can't go back anymore. So what we need to do is we need to jump to the last character in the previous team's turn. And here you'll see, so we set current team turn equal to previous team, and then we set our index equal to, and then we set it to the end of that team. And then same thing here, exactly the same. We set our current player turn equal to our current team turn and our current team index. So now these three scripts, you'll notice, are the same in both of them. And it's just update team order, update next player in line, and update previous player in line. So update team order is, this is just saying, hey, if the current team is red, that means the next team is blue and the previous team was the intermediate. If the current team is blue, the next team is intermediate and the previous team is red. And if the current team is intermediate, then the next team is red and the blue team and the previous team is blue. It just creates a circle or a triangle in this point because there's three lists that we're iterating between. But it's just a cycle that I'm creating at this point. You'll notice here that if we look at the code, if current team equals blue, okay, well, we know that next team is intermediate and previous team is red. So if I go backwards, well, now I'm in the red team, right? And if I were to go through the blue team, I would come to my intermediate set, which just consists of one camera focus point right now. We could put more, we could put less. And I notice, okay, so if current team turn is intermediate, well, we know that the next team is red and the previous is blue. So if I go back, we'll go to blue. I come back to intermediate and I go to next, I'll go to red. Okay, so I added these lines right here. So you can comment out this else if here and then comment these two lines out and uncomment these two, and the same thing here if you don't want that intermediate set. You'll notice here that if we just look at what I have commented out, it just says next term is red, or if current turn is red, next turn is blue, and previous turn is blue, right? Because we're just going back and forth between the two. And same thing if current team is blue, the next team and previous team is red. If we wanted to add more teams, maybe you wanted 4 or 5 teams, you would just keep adding onto this end of this list and just making a circle. That way we can always keep track of what's next and what team is next and what team was before us. And then once we're inside that current team, then we start iterating through the players. So that's update team order. And then update next player in line and update previous player in line are very similar as well. All we're saying, we just want to check our current team index, so where we are inside of our current team. We want to check the one right after it. And we say, hey, if that is existing inside of our list, then our next player turn is going to be that object in that list. But if we're at the end of our team, that means the next player turn needs to be the first object in the next teams. So here we say next player turn equals our list, find value, our next team turn, and that first object there. So again, when we get to the end of our list, we say, hey, there's no more characters in this team. Our next player is going to be the first player in the next team, and we push over to that. Same thing with previous. We want to check, hey, are we still in our list? Moving back one isn't going to knock us out of our list, right? We say, okay, it's not. We're only at character index 2. We still have character index 1 and 0 in front of us, so you can go back. But then once we get to character index 0, we say, hey, there's no more characters that came before this. So what we need to do is we need to jump to the last object in the previous turn because we know that was the one that came beforehand. Again, think of everything as just this big circle and this subset of teams and then players inside that team. And that's how this is getting done. So pretty much if you're trying to work with this code and you want to modularize it and turn it into a bigger project, really the only thing I would, you really just don't have to mess with, let me take a look at this. Yeah, I would not mess with any of these 4 lines of code. These can all stay about the same. If you need to change something, change these 2 lines of code right here. Honestly, you probably should just get rid of this script and supplement that with whatever you plan on doing. But that's pretty much everything, guys. So the way it's set up, it's super clean. All you have to do is just put the objects into the team and assign where you want to choose to go forward and go backwards through your list, and everything will work. And then once you're there, all you have to do is, if we create some script, let's just call this, I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter what the script is. All we need to do is we just need to check if O combat manager dot current player turn equals ID. So we can throw this inside of our player object. So yeah, let's actually, let's take all of this. Let's delete this. Right now I just have a player parent, right, that's keeping track of everything. If you look in here, it doesn't really have anything exciting. This is just to deal with like the visuals of like how the character highlights and animates when they're selected and stuff like that. I'll let you look at this. This is kind of just extra little fuzzy stuff. But all I would have to do is in this step, all I would have to do is just check to see if it is our turn, right? So this would be some other player object, and this would be the parent to it. And all we would say, okay, if OCombatManager.player turn equals ID, that means it's our turn. It is our turn. Do stuff here. That's it. And then you just throw your code in here. So you could do a state machine inside of here. You could do whatever you wanted to right inside this piece of code. And honestly, you could leave this in the parent, because if you just leave this in the player parent object and then have objects be children stem off of this, then this will still work. This will always just check to see if the current object it is the current player. You might have to do something like dot object index, ID dot object index, something like that, or this might be like, you might have to do something just to make sure that these two are matching up. But just mess with that a little bit, and one of those will work. And once it does, then okay, it's good to go. It's your turn. You can do whatever you want. You can draw up a whole UI, a menu system. You could say, hey, here's all your spells, here's all your items, draw all that, let them navigate through it, do all of that stuff, and then have them cast spells or attack. And then at the end of all of that, you just call that next turn function, and it'll move to the next turn, and then it'll just iterate through that again. So really, there's you can't get any cleaner and simpler than this. I really don't know how to make it any better. My goal was to make this as modular as possible and as dynamic as possible, and I think it's a pretty good job for that. So let me know if you have any feedback or any comments. I'm not going to go over this because this is just setting which way they're facing, and this we can actually get rid of because we don't use that. And then the active variable is just checking to see if they're active, draw them at their normal speed and their normal image index and their normal color. If not, set their image index to 0 and draw them a little bit grayer. Like I said, this intermediate object camera focus point is nothing. It just exists in the room for the camera to focus in on. And this camera just utilizes GameMaker Studio 2's camera system for just basic movement. I definitely recommend looking up some videos. Sean Spalding has a fantastic tutorial video on this stuff, and that's honestly where I learned it from. So I'm not going to go over that because that's not really the point of this. Those are just some extra flavor pieces to make this combat system a little more enjoyable. If you guys like this, go ahead and leave a comment or give it a like and let me know. I might build on top of this and turn it into a more complex combat system so that you guys can turn it into an actual full-blown game. But for now, this is a great framework and a great just kind of bare bones layout for you to go forward and actually build your own combat system right on top of it. All right, guys, thanks for stopping in, and I'll see you in the next video.